What's up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Bearded Wholesome and All Things Baltimore. I'm the host, Matt Trigger. Tonight is a very special night. I have a Baltimore football legend joining the show. Before I bring him on, I want to say happy 67th birthday to my dad. Got a chance to see him today. Dad, if you're watching, happy birthday. But without further ado, Baltimore Colts legendary middle linebacker, Stan White. Stan, welcome to the show.
Well, good to be here. Good game yesterday. Really good season by the Ravens, but just not quite good enough.
Yeah, it was a little bitter watching the game yesterday. I was
Yeah.
I kept on thinking to myself that we should have been there. It was a little tough to watch.
Yeah, I texted John Harbaugh during the week because he was on Fox News one night, and he did a good job talking about his faith and the team and everything. And I texted him and said, geez, I wish you were still working because I really remember that week down in New Orleans when he was going against his brother against the 49ers, then with Jim Harbaugh. And we spent the whole week down there with him, going to practice, being with the players in the meetings. And, that's one of the thrills that I've had is be able to broadcast a Super Bowl. I broadcast a Rose Bowl and a Super Bowl and some playoffs and bowl games and stuff, but I think the Super Bowl tops them all.
I'm sure it does. You've been involved with the pro football game for sheesh, 5 almost 6 decades. It's been, you know, it's
Long
been a
time.
it's been a very long time. And what was it like watching the season unfold this year where in the beginning of the year with the Ravens, they didn't really know if they were going to, you didn't really know who they were identity wise. And
Mm-hmm.
then, they start clicking, start reeling off, a couple of dominant wins here and there. Then they go into San Francisco on Christmas night. They steamroll San Francisco. Then they come and put almost 60 on Miami the following week. And you think that, nobody can touch this team going into the playoffs. And then they have that, that they came out flat against Houston after the little bit of the layoff, and then they got everything together in the second half. What do you think was the biggest thing that fell apart for them with the Kansas City Chiefs game?
They just didn't run the ball well enough. I mean, that's what makes play action and Lamar so effective. If they run the ball, then you can't put everything into the basket to stop Lamar. You got to stop the running game first, and that opens up the play action, his scrambles, his designed runs, all those things. And they got away from that because they got behind, but they were never that far behind. I mean, the defense played well enough to win. You hold Kansas City to 17 points, you're supposed to win. If San Francisco would have held Kansas City to 17 points, they'd be the Super Bowl champions today.
You're absolutely right. It just seemed like it was everything that could go wrong went wrong, and then what got us to that point was no longer being utilized during the game. And we can armchair quarterback everything. And I know it's a little bit different for you because I mean you played the game, you broadcasted, you've been around the multiple iterations of the Ravens. This team really felt different. It felt like they were a team of destiny, so to speak. And here we are in the off season officially. We're not too far from the NFL Combine. This team has a lot of pending free agents and not a lot of money to work with. So they're gonna have to make some tough choices. Stan, they're gonna have to make we're probably gonna lose Patrick Queen. We're probably gonna lose Geno Stone. It's just one of those situations where you don't know if you're going to keep Matabike. They're probably going to end up tagging him. He's the most valuable guy that I
Yes.
believe that they have, in terms of free agents. What do you think is the main thing they need to focus on this offseason with their limited resources?
Well, that's the hard part. I mean, Lamar, obviously MVP of the league. He earned that money. But Patrick Mahomes is famous not for being MVP of the league, but for winning all those Super Bowls. Tom Brady is famous for winning all those Super Bowls. And I lived through this. I mean, Burt Jones, to me, is a Hall of Fame quarterback, was the best quarterback in the 70s. He was the MVP in the 1976 season. Yet, he never won a playoff game. And that is what people remember. And I think Lamar knows that. He's 2-4 in the playoffs, or whatever the number is. It's not enough. I go back to Joe Flacco, who, won 10 playoff games, went to the AFC Championship three times, and people sort of turned on him, and they love Lamar, and rightfully so. But what do you judge? Do you judge on the MVP and how exciting you are? But as a coach, and I've coached high school now for like 27 years, it's all coming down to winning football games, not what the stats are and not all those things. But that's what you're remembered for long term is you talk about Dan Marino. What's the first thing they say about him? He had the greatest stats ever, and the first thing they say is he never won a Super Bowl.
Greatest quarterback to never win one.
Yeah, John Elway, they said he could never win the big one. He lost several Super Bowls until his last 2 years. He won 2. Now he's legendary. So that's what it comes down to. And I think Lamar's going to have a lot of more chances. And I hope he ends up a little bit like, I don't want him to wait till his last 2 years, but a little bit like John Elway, where he can get that monkey off his back. Remember Steve Young, when he finally won a Super Bowl? That's exactly what he said. He grabbed something and said, I got the monkey off my back.
And that's funny that you mentioned Steve Young, because there's been a lot of comparisons that have been popping up between Lamar and guys like Elway and Young, where they had to go through literal hell to get their Super Bowl victories. And as much as I cannot stand the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that their tight end Travis Kelce is one of the most pretentious players in the league. But at the same time, he is one of the best tight ends to ever play football.
Yes, he is.
And Patrick Mahomes, no matter what anybody says about him, that man is a winner. He has that gene. Like some guys just win, and they know how to win by any means necessary. And Lamar's going to have a lot of work to do. He's got his work cut out for him, because Stan, if you want to kind of hear me out for a second, I'm painting the picture, but this year was a perfect storm for Lamar, because Aaron Rodgers tears his Achilles in the first drive of the season this year. Then you have Joe Burrow go down with a season-ending injury. You have Deshaun Watson go down with a season-ending injury. Trevor Lawrence has a less than stellar year. Then you have C.J. Stroud, who's still a rookie in the South. The Titans have no quarterback, and then Patrick Mahomes has probably one of his worst years statistic-wise, and they're one of the most inconsistent football teams going into the postseason. And you can say the same thing about the Buffalo Bills. Meanwhile, Lamar's railroading the league in terms of wins and accolades, and you're not going to get that again next year. Everybody's going to be back healthy. Yeah. And you never know what the quarterback movement's going to be elsewhere. The AFC is loaded with quarterbacks. It seems like it's been that way for the better part of the last couple of years. So Lamar isn't going to have, most likely he won't have Odell Beckham unless Odell comes back and plays for pennies on the dollar, which at the end of the day, I know he loves Lamar and he loves the team, but is he going to play for $2 or $3 million or $6 million or anything? You would. Yeah, absolutely. What do we do about Ronnie Stanley? Do you extend him, or do you say, good luck on your future endeavors? Do you keep Morgan Moses around? Do you bring Zeitler back? Do you bring Simpson back? So you're now having a possibility where you're going into another season where 4 out of your 5 offensive linemen could be brand new, and you have a $262 million quarterback sitting in your pocket without the assurances of any all pros up front.
Yes, you need the line, both lines. That's why Metabuke is so important. You need to stop the run, and you need to be able to run the ball. I mean, that's part of the difference in yesterday's game is Kansas City ran the ball better. They didn't get the ball to McCaffrey. I think you could say the same thing about what San Francisco did against Kansas City as what the Ravens did against Kansas City. They didn't stay with their running game enough to win the game. But if you look at that game, really, it was a special teams mistakes that San Francisco made that cost them the game. The blocked extra point, number one, and the punt that went off the guy's leg that gave a touchdown to Kansas City and made it an overtime game. So that people got to remember how important Justin Tucker is or a special teams is in the football game. It's not quite as much as offensive defense, but it's pretty close. It's the difference in a lot of games.
And you're absolutely right. That punt was just one of those happenstance things where it took a bad bounce off of a player's ankle, and the returner couldn't quite get a grasp on it. And like you said, Patrick Mahomes turned that into a touchdown literally a play later. It was, I believe, he
Yep.
scored on first down on that drive, and like you said, the line is important, and there's a possibility that we could have a completely new left tackle protecting Lamar. The only returning incumbent starter could be Tyler Linderbaum, and then on the opposite side, we seem to have caught lightning in a bottle with Van Noy and Clowney this year, two guys over the age of 30, where they combined for almost 20 sacks. And as much as I want both of those guys back, I highly doubt either one is going to come back and play on the veteran minimum like they did this year. I think Clowney earned himself another contract, whether it's here or elsewhere, but I don't know if they're going to invest in Clowney the way that, they would have if he would have had about 4 or 5 sacks instead of 9.5.
Yeah, the only reason those guys will come back for that is because they think they have a chance to win a Super Bowl at the end of their careers. If they can win a Super Bowl, then you can take less money and you can make money other ways. But that's going to be the question. Ronnie Stanley is a great player, but he's not there half the time, at least half the time. Almost every season, he has injuries. And, do you put a lot of money into a situation where a guy has had such an injury history? Do you really think that you can get your dollar's worth for him staying healthy for 16, 18, how many games that you need a left tackle? So that's going to be a big decision, I think, for Eric DeCosta and for John Harbaugh.
And I don't envy that position because at the end of the day, he, before he had that catastrophic ankle injury against Pittsburgh, he was an all pro.
Yeah.
He moved mountains. And it seems like what's crazy is that we paid him on his basis that he was a great pass blocker. And now it seems like in the older he's gotten, he has become a fantastic run blocking left tackle, but he gives up a lot of ground in the pass blocking game. So it seems like his game is almost flipped ever since he got hurt.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to adjust, and I'm sure he got stronger working out with the weight program, and that'll help your run blocking and all those injuries. It takes a toll on your quickness and your feet, and that's what pass blocking is. And your get offs. That's why you see so many, illegal procedure penalties against offensive linemen, because they're trying to get that first step on the defensive lineman, which is the whole key to their success. So, yeah, I can understand why Ronnie had to, those things happen over time.
Absolutely. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit of defense with you, Stan, since that is like your absolute forte. Patrick Queen, he had an up and down career as a Baltimore Raven. It was a little bit of a crazy situation because we drafted him in the height of the pandemic where we really didn't have any opportunities to scout, and the combine was a little bit different. And, there wasn't a whole lot of, senior days going on. And a lot of the scouting had to really be done by watching film. And then he got here. He was up and down, and then he really didn't flourish until we traded for Roquan Smith in the middle of the 22 season. And he's been a dynamite off-ball linebacker, really because teams focus on Roquan more than him. He's going to obviously go and get paid somewhere else. I highly doubt the Ravens are going to put 40+ million of their cap into one position that's not Lamar Jackson. And how do you feel going into 24 with the prospect of Trenton Simpson being that guy next to Roquan?
Well, we don't know. I mean, when he gets in there, we can see. The deal with Queen was he was in the middle. You always get more attention. You introduced me as a middle linebacker. I really was a right outside linebacker. I had to play the middle sometimes because Mike Curtis got hurt or Jim Chayonsky got hurt. And I can tell you, it's a big difference. You have linemen coming off at you all the time when you're the middle linebacker. When you're the outside linebacker, you get running backs and tight ends and more of those type of guys blocking you. And, I kept talking about the texting I do with John Harbaugh. And as soon as they got Roquan Smith, and after a game or two, That's what the exact comment I made to John. He said, Patrick Queen is now where he should be, and he is thriving at that position. He was not a middle linebacker. Roquan Smith is like Mike Curtis. He is a middle linebacker. He can get away from those big guys. He can take them on, all those different things. Patrick Queen is an outside stacked linebacker, not the guy in the middle that has to take on a bunch of linemen all the time.
Yeah, and it was clearly evident. Roquan's probably an inch or two taller and probably 25 pounds heavier than Patrick Queen, and more than anybody else, taking on an offensive line full head of steam in the second level, that's a daunting task. It's like a car crash every single play.
Well, you can't wait for them to get to that second level. That's the key. You have to go down. You always talk about downhill. You have to meet them before they get that momentum coming off of their blocks. If you can do that, and he's very good at doing that and knowing which hole he has to cover, because if you go downhill to the wrong hole, your whole defense is in trouble. So Roquan's smart, and he's big, and he's strong, and he makes plays, and that's what you need out of your middle linebacker. He really made this whole defense a whole lot better, because we were talking about everybody picked nobody can beat the Ravens is what the mantra was going into the playoffs. Nobody's going to, after what they did to San Francisco and Miami back to back, everybody thought, oh no, and they could have been undefeated this year, really. The 3 games that they lost in the regular season, they were up by 14 points in the fourth quarter in all 3 of those games. So, I mean, they were a dominant team this year. They just had a bad game in the playoffs at the wrong time, which is the playoffs are always the wrong time to have a bad game. Although Kansas City overcame a really bad first half to win that game yesterday.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you. You have the merit and the authority to speak on the matter. Um, Baltimore defense, whether it's the Colts or the Ravens, the defense has always been feared. It's been predicated on physicality. Um, Everybody holds in present day the standard of middle linebacker in Baltimore to Ray Lewis, and you had the privilege of covering him. I'm sure you know Ray very well. Is Roquan the closest that we've seen to Ray since Ray retired in 2012?
Well, certainly the closest we've seen in Baltimore. There's no doubt about that. And that's a high standard to live up to. Like I said, I played with Mike Curtis, and he should be in the Hall of Fame. Ted Hendricks was the other linebacker who is in the Hall of Fame. So I got to play with some very good linebackers in my career. And, Roquan is very, very good. I don't know that he's quite Ray Lewis, but he's the next best thing. That's for sure. He's made the whole difference in this defense.
Yes, and I agree with you. Nobody can be Ray Lewis. He's one of one in terms of, he might be the greatest middle linebacker to ever play football.
I put him up there with Dick Butkus. Those are the two that I think. And Butkus only played 8 or 9 years because of injuries, and Ray played 17. So I have to give him the edge because of his longevity. They were both great middle linebackers.
Absolutely. Do you think that sometimes these players are unfairly given comparisons for for organizations? Like with the Ravens, left tackle is synonymous with John Ogden. When you think middle linebacker, you think Ray Lewis. When you think free safety, you think Ed Reed. When you think pass rush, you think Terrell Suggs. Do you think that's difficult for today's players to live up to the expectations of what the organization has set, given the rule changes from those eras to present day?
Well, yeah, that's always going to happen. I don't care where you're at. In Green Bay, it was Aaron against Brett Favre. So it goes right down the line. You're always compared to the people that came before you, and that's just you got to live up. You got to live with that. And I think Roquan is saying, no, I'm not Ray Lewis. Nobody's Ray Lewis, but I'm going to be as good as I can be. And you're going to get compared. There's no way to stop that, especially in today's media. We didn't have all those different things looking at us in my day. We had, ESPN wasn't even around yet. So
right.
until the end of my career. When I was up in Detroit, ESPN was there. In the USFL, ESPN was there. But there just wasn't, the only highlights we got was on Monday Night Football, with Howard Cosell at halftime. So, yeah, it's a whole different world. And you're to be able to live with that.
Yeah, that's definitely difficult. I do want to ask you a little bit about your playing days. Granted, you played in probably one of the toughest eras. It was true Iron Man gladiator sport type football. It wasn't what it is today. And like you said, it's inevitable that it's going to change. Um, what was it like for you? I know that you were in, I believe either Chicago or Detroit with the USFL, but when the Colts left Baltimore, um, what did that do from you? What did that do to you even from afar?
Well, it hurt because I was actually in Arizona at that time, and Phoenix was one of the places that Irsay they were talking about him coming. So I was playing for the Arizona Wranglers. George Allen was the head coach. We were in Chicago the first year, and then moved to Arizona. But it really hurt because I remember the Baltimore Orioles. Who became the Baltimore Orioles? You remember?
The St. Louis Browns, I believe.
Right. Who remembers the St. Louis Browns really, though? And I
Right.
didn't. I said, "Are the Baltimore Colts going to be like that? The St. Louis Browns." I thought that right away. That's my legacy, is to be in that situation. I've coached high school here for 26 years, and you say you were with the Colts. The kids all think you were with Indianapolis. A lot of them don't even have a recognition that there was a Baltimore Colts. I think their parents might have one, and certainly their grandparents, but too many people just don't even realize that the Baltimore Colts ever did exist. And I think the lucky thing is we had Johnny Unitas, so that brings it up all the time. Johnny Unitas of the Baltimore Colts. That's sort of what keeps our legacy alive.
Absolutely. I'm gonna ask you because I with a little bit of the older crowd for football. Do you believe that they should have left the record books alone and not taken them to Indy?
The first years that the Ravens were here, they got to use the Colts records in their press guide and stuff because they weren't allowed to take the Cleveland ones with them. That was part of the settlement. So they used them, and then when they got their own, they just went away with that, and they're all in Indianapolis. In fact, a lot of times I'll look up myself, and it'll say Stan White, Indianapolis Colts. It says Johnny Indianapolis in the Hall of Fame. You go in there. I live close to Canton. I grew up close to Canton, Ohio, so I go there with some of my grandchildren. Every once in a while, every other year or so, and you see that. You don't see as enough of the Baltimore Colts as I would like to see, having been a part of that organization. So it's a little bit hurtful, and it does impact the legacy that you have. And I think that's part of the reason maybe Mike Curtis isn't in the Hall of Fame, is he played for a team that doesn't exist.
That's a fair assessment. Wanted to ask you before I ask you, how is it coaching high school? You said you've been doing it for the better part of 26, 27 years. What is your favorite part about coaching high school football?
Just kids learning discipline, learning how to be teammates, learning how to work together. I was 19 years at Gilman, and then 6 years at St. Francis, and then next year I'm going to start up at Calvert Hall. But St. Francis was a unique situation where a lot of the kids came out of tough situations, and we housed about 40 of those kids just to get them in a situation where we knew they'd be fed, where they would get to school, they would do their homework, all those different things. And those kids, you could take away screens, you could take away cards, you could do anything, and it didn't motivate them. But playing football, being on the field, getting a chance to play, getting game time, that taught them the discipline that I think they'll need the rest of their lives. And football also gives those kids an opportunity to go to college. And that was being downtown Baltimore, what was that, 40 years later than when I would be down there all the time with the Colts. It's a whole different world down there now. And it's a tough world, and it's tough for those kids. but to get them in a situation where they can improve their lives, that's the most rewarding thing about seeing these kids develop and go on and get their college degrees and have families and be good husbands and good fathers and things like that.
That's very true. There was a controversy with St. Francis a couple years ago, and I'm a Mount St. Joe grad, and I remember getting the press release through email from my alumni association saying that they were refusing to put St. Francis on their MIA schedule. Um, St. Francis became one of those high school powerhouses. How did you guys feel in that time where all the local high schools wanted nothing to do with you because you guys had seemingly Division I football players at every position?
Well, yes, it was sort of unique because we had very good team. We won 13 out of 19 championships at Gilman, and we actually beat teams worse in the last couple of years at Gilman than we did the first couple of years at St. Francis. But there was never any controversy about us at Gilman, But once we were down, and let's just put this straight: some of the people in that league did not want to go downtown and play at Patterson Park. They felt they experienced it and they didn't like it, and that was part of the whole scenario. They talked about injuries and so forth. The worst injury we ever had was against Gilman at St. Francis when a kid got paralyzed. One of our kids got paralyzed playing against for our St. Francis kids playing against Gilman. I don't think we ever did damage to other teams. We were better. We were better. And high school now, there's a lot of these national teams around, and St. Francis, became one of those out of necessity. We had to find schedules, and then we had to get better. And kids wanted to come and play because we were playing on ESPN and all these different networks, and we were flying around the country. High school is a little bit like college used to be. Maybe when I was there, the college is like the NFL used to be with the NIL now and transfers and free agency and money being paid. And the NFL has turned into the greatest entertainment vehicle in the world, and or at least in this country. So it's just a progression of football. And I think we didn't feel good about being kicked out of the league. We didn't like that. And I think guys at St. Joe's, I think the players wanted to play us.
They did. They did.
And,
I know a couple of them.
and the Calvert Hall players I know wanted to play us because they liked the competition. They felt, they got seen also because everybody was looking at those games, and it helped them in their college recruitment and so forth. Being if they have a good game against us, you can be sure that'd be up on their highlight film.
Absolutely. I'm gonna kind of throw it back to when I was at Mount St. Joe. I was there from 2003 to 2007, and I played against you my entire career when you were at Gilman. And I remember having to play against Ben Eaton, who you coached with at St. Francis.
Yep.
I've never been hit harder in my life than when Ben hit me when he was a running back.
Yeah.
And I mean, I made the tackle. I'm not gonna, I didn't go out like a punk, but uh,
I'll have to ask Ben.
yeah. It was 2006. It was a torrential downpour where there was about 7 inches of mud on the field. But this is before you guys got the turf over there. But I remember that's how people felt about Gilman. That's how people felt about Our Lady of Good Counsel and St. John's Prep back in the early 2000s. Where I remember my first high school game was against Our Lady Good Counsel, and I was sick. I was still under 6 feet tall at the time, and I'm looking at the nose tackle. I'm a left guard, and the nose tackle is 6'2", 310 pounds, and this is the freshman team. I was on fresh sop. I didn't even play JV my freshman year, and that was like a welcome to high school football moment where they just cranked out Division I athletes like it was nothing. So I didn't want St. Joe to go that route, and I know Calvert Hall made that choice, and I get I guess they were probably more pissed off that they couldn't do what St. Francis was doing as opposed to just being mad at him for anything else. But I wanted to ask you about one particular player that you coached at St. Francis. He's won a national championship this year. with Michigan, Blake Corum.
Yep.
Where do you see him? Where do you see him fitting in the pros? Like, who do you think would be the ideal situation for Blake to get drafted?
Well, you've seen J.K. Dobbins.
Yes.
He's exactly what J.K. Dobbins is. I tried to get him to go to Ohio State to replace J.K., and he almost flipped at the last minute, but he's such a great kid. He had made commitment. His commitment. He thought about it. He came to me, asked me to talk to the Ohio State coaches, but in the end, he is a great, great kid. And he stayed at Michigan because he could make more money at Michigan than he could in the NFL as a running back. And I think they don't draft running backs in the first round. If he was in my day, he'd be a first round pick. Back in the O.J. Simpson, Walter Payton, all those type of guys, Earl Campbell, they're all first round picks. He is a great running back, a great team player, and I think he'll have a great NFL career if he can stay healthy. That's always a key with the running backs.
And it seems like it's almost inevitable that majority of these running backs, an ACL is usually, it used to be a devastating injury, but nowadays it's a 6 to 9 month recovery process, and they get their explosiveness back eventually. I personally would love if Blake got drafted here because you don't know if we're going to be able to keep Gus or JK comes back. But yeah, I was curious because I know that Blake Corum was on a couple of those teams that you coached, and
Yes.
I wanted to ask you because you did play in the USFL. The league made a comeback a couple of years ago, and they just recently merged with the XFL to create the UFL. Do you see spring football actually catching on now that there's money behind it and the merger seemed to have went rather smoothly?
Yes, in fact, our league was doing well back in the day, USFL. The last two games I won in the USFL were against Steve Young and Jim Kelly. Both of those are Hall of Fame quarterbacks that went on to the NFL. Reggie White got his start in the USFL. So we had a lot of good players and could have competed. But there was a guy named Donald Trump that came along and decided that he was going to take on the NFL. He won the lawsuit, but only $1 in damages. So that ended everything because it just wasn't the money. We were on ESPN because they were just starting. We were the first live games that they ever had, live football games, was on ESPN. And so I think if we'd have stayed in the spring and done the things right, it would have worked out. And I think there is a role for the UFL now, especially in developmental and working with the NFL in development and developing players, loaning players to them to get that game situation. And they signed some players out of the USFL that are playing in the NFL this year. There was a few that made the jump. And I know how hard it is because in 1982, I played the whole season in the NFL. And then a month later, my last game was in RFK Stadium against the Redskins in the playoffs. My first game was 2 months or a month and a half later against the Washington Federals in RFK Stadium. So I played like 8 months in a row of football. So I can understand how tough that might be.
Absolutely. Do you think that the NFL might eventually assign certain teams to UFL teams to where they can send their practice squad guys there to get some reps in the off season to kind of offset not getting any game reps during the months of September to January?
Yeah, I think I would hope that's where everything is headed. If you remember, they had a NFL Europe league that they
Yes.
did. They put the players on there, and then when they came back to the NFL teams, it didn't count against the number of people you could bring to training camp. So it was a big advantage for that league and for the NFL. So and for those players to get that experience and be sure that they're going to be invited to training camp. So I would hope that would be a great thing. I think they don't have a minor league. That could be their minor league. We know how that works in baseball. We see what the Orioles have done with their minor league system and how it's developed them. I think it would be important for players to go through that too.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And before I let you go, Stan, you mentioned the Orioles. Uh, David Rubenstein purchased the team. Cal Ripken's on the ownership group. And Right on the heels of the sale, they traded for Corbin Burns. What do you think the outlook is for the O's this year?
Well, I'm high on. They got Holiday maybe coming up, and all these guys coming up out the farm system, and you know that having all those players at those low salaries gives you a lot of flexibility. And now you got a guy with a bunch of billions, and some of the people that are involved with him have like 100 billion. So I mean, you got some money now that's going to be able to get some players and to add those last little things that make the difference, because Mike Elias has done a great job in building. I mean, he's the one that they should pay to make sure they keep. He's done an unbelievable job of rebuilding the Orioles, because when I first started working for WBAL, there was no football team here, and we had the Orioles. So I would do Orioles pregame and postgame and all those different things. So I got to see the inner workings of how all that was going on in Baltimore. With Edward Bennett Williams owned the team when I started, and Peter bought the team, and I got to know Peter because he was an old Colt fan. He would bring us to the games and stuff. So there was a lot going on with the behind the scenes. That is one of the keys, in maybe more so in baseball than in football or all these others, because of the lack of a salary cap, that you need a strong ownership group to really build. Although I think Michael has shown he could do it on a tight budget too, if you're smart.
Absolutely. So, what are you going to be doing with Calvert Hall? What are you going to be, a position coach? Are you a coordinator? What's going on for the upcoming 24 season?
Yeah, I'll be the defensive coordinator for Calvert Hall. That's what I was for all those years for Gilman and St. Francis, and I used the old George Allen system and just move it into a high school setting. There's some adjustments you have to make, and that's the thing. Kids love football; they'll learn. Gilman has a great academic reputation, and we had a lot of really smart kids, and we were able to do a lot of things defensively. I went to St. Francis and I wasn't sure, because these kids don't have the same academic background. They haven't had the taught how to learn a lot of things. But we did just as much at St. Francis, football wise, as we did at Gilman, because those kids love football, and kids will learn what they love. And that's what I think we'll carry that over to Calvert Hall too.
There you have it. Thank you, Stan, so much. Good luck with prepping for spring practice and installing the defense. I know that work starts the minute you signed on. Good luck, for everybody that you play other than St. Joe. And thank you so much, man, for joining the show and sitting down and talking with me. I know that my father-in-law and my dad are real big fans of yours. They watched you play when they were younger, and you're the first Baltimore Colt legend I had a chance to interview live. So you're always welcome to come back, Stan. Hopefully I can get you back on before the Ravens season starts, and I'll head over to Calvert Hall and check a game out.
Okay. All right.
And thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate coming on. I love talking about Baltimore and the high schools and the Ravens and the Orioles. And, I came here 50 years ago now, a little over 50 years ago, from Ohio, where football is sort of a religion there. And I didn't know what to expect. And Baltimore is very, very much the same as Ohio. They love their sports teams, and it's part of the fabric of their lives too. And that's what I really love about Baltimore.
Thank you so much, Stan. I appreciate you. Listened to you for years on the radio, and played against your vaunted Gilman defenses. Have a great night, man. Thank you so much. This was great.
All right, Matt. Thanks for having me.